Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about the subject of Synology 4-bay NASes, and in this relatively quick video I'm going to walk you through every single one of the 4-bay NASes currently available from Synology and which one best suits your needs. But before we go any further, a couple of disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, I'm only going to talk about Synology NASes that are currently available from them. Yes, I'm sure you found yourself an old DS920 or 918 Plus knocking around on eBay on some rando seller, and that's good. They are good NASes. But I'm not going to talk about them because they are not currently available by the brand in their existing current portfolio. The second thing I'm going to talk about in this video is that although I'm only going to talk about NAS devices, about to contradict myself, that are only available from them now, it is worth highlighting that these are not the only 4-bay NASes that Synology themselves will sell. And in a previous video, as I've talked about before, if you go onto their website and look for older generation NASes like the DS920, which is a great little NAS by the way, you can't find any of the information directly on a product page. You can only find the old docs. However, as discussed in a video I mentioned before, there is the Synology refurb site where occasionally older generation devices, given depending on the region you are in, are refurbished officially by the brand and then resold at a lower price with the existing full 2 or 3 year warranty depending on the device there. So although I am going to talk about these the 4-bay NAS devices today from the brand, it's worth highlighting that you should, if you are interested in older generation devices, before you go on eBay, on Amazon or whatever, Amazon a reseller, do yourself a favour and check out the certified refurbished site, because you may get hold of a very good older generation Synology that runs DSM 7.2 perfectly anyway. So here is the full list of 4-bays from Synology, and 4-bays are kind of the bit where storage gets serious, whether it's for multimedia, for backups, for surveillance, for VMs, business or home user. 4-bay is where it gets serious. Now, the first one we're going to talk about, as you can see from my list on the right, we've got all of the pricing here from Newegg, from today's pricing on the 11th of May. And the first NAS we're going to talk about is the DS420J, a NAS that I'm fairly certain will either be refreshed soon or at least before the end of the year. Now, as you can see, I've labelled this one the backup NAS. Now, why is that? Well, the CPU inside is starting to show its age. Circa 2016-17 when it was released, the RTD 1296, although an impressively capable 64-bit ARM processor, it is somewhat hampered by the rest of the architecture of the system. What do I mean by that? Well, it arrives with 1 gig of fixed memory, and remember, DSM is going to be utilising a good 20-30% of that generally when in use. Also, it arrives with a single gigabit Ethernet port there on the rear. The result is that this is a system that, although it supports traditional RAID storage along with Synology's hybrid RAID and a wide compatibility, it is tremendously low in its scalability. You can't add an expansion device, the CPU will not play nice with transcoding, and there are a lot of DSM services and applications, including Container Manager, that will not run on this because of that architecture being so low to start with there. So just bear in mind that if you're looking at a 4-bay Synology NAS and you've thought, woohoo, the DS420J is my ticket onto the ecosystem, know that this is the lowest rung in the ladder for a reason. And there's a reason why this NAS is $368, and later on we're going to see that price double, quadruple and more throughout this video. I designate this a backup NAS. If you're already running an existing Synology setup for your data storage and you want to add an offsite or even network backup, this is the one I recommend, because this at least allows you to use DSM's apps and services and synchronize Synology NAS systems more effectively and efficiently for NAS to NAS backups, whole NAS image backups, or a multitude of just 3-2-1 backup strategies that this opens the door to. If you want to enjoy local DLNA media, this will do the job, but just bear in mind that this is not a NAS that can juggle many balls in the air. Now, next up, we go to a very similar NAS in a different way. This is the DS418, circa 2017-18 release. This NAS has the exact same CPU as the NAS we just discussed. However, it arrives with twice the memory, and in terms of network connectivity, it's got 2 Ethernet ports that are on the rear. Effectively doubles the external network connectivity, it also doubles the memory that it has, and overall it's just a better placed system to utilize. You remember when I said the 420J would be a modicum of an entry point into multimedia? Well, the 418 sticks the landing a little better. It isn't going to support transcoding, but that CPU can play 4K, although not high-dense HEVC or anything like that natively. On top of that, with the DS418, thanks to upgrade in Synology's DSM 7.2 upgrade, this NAS also does allow you to take advantage of containers, which are now available on a number of ARM-based processors, including this one. So this is also the entry point into containers. It's not the best NAS for that, because that 2 gig of memory isn't great and you can't upgrade it. And there isn't any support of M2 NVMEs on this, but still nonetheless, this NAS still serves as a great entry point into home multimedia users, or those that want to run a non-transcoding Plex Media server, or want to run a local DLNA server. But just know it's still a very modest system, and there's a reason that the price is so similar to that of the 420J, despite them arriving 2 to 2.5 years different in their release strategy. Hold up. Just as I was about to publish this video, I found out Synology had finally revealed the DS423, something we talked about on the channel before, but I didn't realise release was going to be, well, frankly, at the time of recording, today. And this serves as kind of the refresh of the DS418 that we've just talked about. So I just wanted to slip this here, insert it here before we went ahead and published this video. I will say straight away that although ultimately it serves as the refresh of the DS418, and therefore the DS418 is going to slowly fly away, I will say that both of them are going to be available in tandem for a little while yet. And there are actually a couple of distinct differences between them. The DS423 official pages are now live. Expect the pricing to be largely identical. One of the earliest things you must have noticed already is that DS423 casing there is completely different. Now, that means that one particular key feature, which is kind of largely associated with these chassis, is not available here, and that's hot swapping. So the ability to remove drives on the fly is just not available. It utilises what a lot of us have referred to as the bread bin chassis, the old toaster chassis here, and it opens from the back there. But apart from that, the rest of the specifications are effectively just a small incremental increase over that of the DS418, and therefore its same target demographic is largely the same as what we saw for the DS418 there. Straight away, it's got that newer generation Realtek there, the RTD1619B, which again increases the clock speed ever so slightly, and it is still a quad-core processor, but it's still got that 2 gig of default DDR4 memory. It also maintains the 1 gigabit Ethernet network port on there. There's no increase on that, and it's largely the same. It's just utilizing a completely different chassis and a small upgrade on that CPU inside. But with it, it also brings improvements within DSM 7.2, allowing you to take advantage of containers on this system. We've already got BTRFS thanks to the way they improve the efficiency of DSM and what they can make the most of on those 64-bit ARMs. But if you're looking at a system for entry-level containers, this is going to be the one for you. And again, thanks to DSM 7.2 and the Container Manager update over standard Docker, although it's the same program, which has now allowed containers through Docker to be made available on this more affordable price point. Also, it's worth highlighting right now, at the time of recording, Plex Media Server is not supported by this device. There's no official version of Plex, although you can presumably use Plex via container to run on this system. It's worth highlighting that. That's why this isn't really counting as an entry-level Plex system in our 4-bays. And also, again, regarding pricing, just expect the pricing to be largely the same as the DS418. But let's return to the original 4-bay guide onto the next one in that series. Next up, we talk about where things get a bit grounded, and weirdly, this is the most recent release of all the ones we've talked about, the $499 DS423 Plus, and as you can see, I designated this the Plex NAS. Why is that? Well, this is the first NAS on our list that has an Intel Celeron processor. Now, this is not a new Celeron by any means. It is a 2019 generation Celeron, but it has integrated graphics. It can handle 4K transcoding, and definitely if you're going to be running HEVC media on non-HEVC supported devices, this will be very good for you. It's not the beefiest machine, but it does arrive with not only a couple of M2 NVMe ports on the rear, but it also has gigabit Ethernet ports on the rear, but it also has M2 NVMe bays inside that can be used for storage pools, not just caching, but storage pools. And this is where not only have we now got a NAS with the main area of storage supporting things like SHR, but on top of that, we've got two NVMe's for a super fast area of storage we can run containers from, we can run VMs from, we can run a lot of our databases from that we want to be a great deal quicker. This is probably the most feature-rich starting block in Synology's portfolio. But just bear in mind, in a not dissimilar way to what we've just discussed with the 418, this NAS has something of a lower glass ceiling. It does not support expansions. None of the NASs thus far allow you to bolt on a 5 or 12 bay expansion, so 4 bays, that's your lot. And the memory, although it arrives with 2 gig of memory that can be expanded, because the initial 2 gig is soldered to the internal board, just like the ones we've talked about, and the CPU can only support up to 8 gig, this system can only allow that 4 gig module extra, meaning a rather bizarre 6 gig memory maximum. So when that comes to VMs and containers, that 6 gig may be something of a problem for you in terms of scaling the resources towards those different buckets and containers. But in terms of Plex Media Server, this CPU, although it's old, does the job. And this system with a dual LAN on the rear, which can support link aggregation, failover and SMB multi-channel, means that you can really open up the network bandwidth on the rear. It's just a real shame that a lot of Synology NASs still to this day do not support officially 2.5 gigabit Ethernet adapters. A real shame. But the DS423 serves as kind of the DS920 with its wings clipped a bit to a lot of users. And for those of you that wanted the DS920 when it was around and it's not available anymore, this is as close as you're going to get, brand new from the brand. Now, moving forward, we'll talk about probably, I would argue, one of the best NASs in this lineup, but also one of the most contentious by a country mile. What do I mean by that? The DS923 served as the upgrade to the aforementioned DS920, and the DS923 went more business. In the same way that 423 kind of occupies the Plex area in a way that the 920 before it does, this one is where business really gets established. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first and foremost, the CPU. The AMD Ryzen R1600 is a dual-core x86 processor with a real focus on file processing. That means with its 2.6 gigahertz clock speed that can be burst up to 3.1, its lack of integrated graphics will annoy some users who want to enjoy encode, decode, or graphic-enabled processes. But this CPU can really push that data hard. And Synology over the last 4 years have really been harnessing the capabilities of these embedded Ryzen processors, the V1500B before this one. And this is a great example. Also, the 4 gig of memory it arrives with, which can be upgraded, by the way, to 32 gig, which is massive, is ECC, error correcting code, or error code correction, meaning that as data passes through the system, it creates a checksum, a parity bit where it compares the data as it passes through the memory at the beginning and the end, and if there's any differences that traditionally may have been stored, inconsistencies that give way to things like bit rot and data failure, particularly in archives and zipped up files and larger data packets comprised of many parts, the ECC memory ensures that this is taken care of before the final write. Now, with this, the system allows expandability as well, so you can add a 5-bay expansion down the line, and it does arrive with 2 gigabit Ethernet ports that are on the rear, 2 1GBE ports, but also the option to add 10GBE. Now, it is proprietary 10GBE. And by that I mean it's Synology's own adapter, which is convenient as hell, by the way. It's a really convenient install, but that aside, it's an expensive 10GBE upgrade, noticeably more expensive than any traditional 10G PCIe card there. So there's swings and roundabouts on that one. The M2 NVMe, much like the DS423, can be used for storage pools, which is really, really good news, and means that this system with its 10G port will allow maybe content creators to edit work on the M2 NVMe's as a storage pool, and then they can use the 4 bays of storage as warm or even cold archival storage, or create multiple storage pools and create a lovely internal flow system with DSM as needed, or run databases, VMs, containers considerably better on this system, because unlike the 423, which had the internal NVMe performance, but not the external performance. This allows you to open up the external bandwidth considerably. But do bear in mind that the M2 NVMe's on this device and on the DS423 are throttled down to ×1 speed. The result is that the M2 NVMe's you install inside this will be limited to 1000 megs. Also, I should have mentioned this earlier, you can only use Synology's own M2 NVMe's. Nonetheless, if you're a business user that's looking for a compact but highly capable Synology solution, that's the one you want to look at. Now, when we move on to our final three solutions, these are the ones where things get rather bizarre. Now, with that, we look at the DS422. The 422 is a bizarre little NAS. Why do I use the word bizarre? Because it's really similar to the one we just discussed, but it's had its wings clipped. It's a rack mount device. As you can see, it arrives $100 more than the DS923. And the DS923 you can actually pick up a bit cheaper as well. The 422 has that exact same CPU. This one has the exact same clock speed on that CPU. It also has 4 bays of storage. It also has the two 1GBE ports. It also uses the same network upgrade as well. So why is it $100 more? Well, that's the rack mount tax for you. Rack mounts are designed slightly differently with horizontal cooling all the way through the system, and also this half-depth rack mount utilizes a very different chassis. It's a 1U height and it doesn't support expansions. It only has 2 gig of memory that can't be expanded, and overall lacks a lot of the expandability of what we've seen from the DS923, but it's designed as a featured entry rack mount device for those that have got existing rack cabinets or want something that can be stored away in a server room or at the bottom of a server tower cabinet. If you're looking at rack mounts, this is the entry point into Synology's portfolio. But before I go further, while we're making that comparison, we look at the 822. Why are we talking about the 822? Because the 822 also brings to the party the same level of size in terms of a 1U height, but this time with an embedded Ryzen, but a different Ryzen, so a quad core instead of a dual. This one has 2 gig of memory that can be upgraded up to 32 gig. It also uses a conventional PCIe upgrade card, a normal PCIe card upgrade rather than the proprietary module. And although it doesn't have the M2 NVMe's, it does support expansions. And this is one, as you can see, is SMB storage recommended. This is the device with a redundant power supplier option. This is the traditional rack mount, and I would say this is the middle ground rack mount. It lacks integrated graphics, but if you are looking at a rack mount solution that has elements of scalability and expandability, this is the one you need. Unfortunately, as you can see, you are paying for that. But bear in mind that there is a redundant power supply version to factor in. It is an older gen box and one that I do think will see an upgrade in the second half of 2023 or the early 2024. But right now, in terms of expandable, affordable rack mounts, this is the entry point. Whereas the 422, on the other hand, is nowhere near as expandable, but it is the entry point into the rack portfolio from Synology. Now we've got two solutions left to talk about. Firstly, we have one of the oldest rack mounts that we've talked about thus far, the RS1619XS, another NAS I think that will see an upgrade within the next year. This runs on an Intel quad-core, a Xeon D, an older gen Xeon, but still a very capable processor, running on 8 gig of memory that can be upgraded up to a stonking 64 gig. This is the business 4-bay rack mount, tippity top. It's the height. If you're looking at rack mounts from Synology and you want to prioritize or at least leverage the storage against the hardware, this is the one you go to. The price point of close to $2,000 does not make it cheap, and price has gone up since the initial $1,600 to $1,700 at launch. But in that time, this device has always proven something of a popular rack mount choice. It's a 4-bay, but it's a powerful 4-bay. When up to this point, every Synology 4-bay rack mount had always been rather lackluster or middling in its power. As you can see, I've labelled it the Content Studio VM, but as we scroll through with its expandability to add 12 bays of storage to the initial 4, M2 NVMe's, which sadly at the moment do not support M2 SSD storage pools, but maybe it will see an upgrade like the other devices we've seen in DSM 7.2. It's still a tremendously powerful 4-bay and arguably the most capable 4-bay of all of the 4-bay NASes we have talked about thus far. And if you are a business user who wants to find the middle ground between power and storage, this is the one for you. With a huge amount of expandability and scalability, it's very good. But just bear in mind, it probably will see an upgrade in the next year and a refresh to a newer model. Now, before we go, we got to talk about this one. Technically a 4-bay NAS, and I think someone would call me out on the comments if I didn't at least highlight it. This is the DVA3221. This is their surveillance NAS. The DVA3221 runs on an Intel Atom processor in the Denverton family, and it also arrives with 8 gig of memory that can be scaled up. What improves this? It has a graphics card. It is designed for AI services and AI analysis. So unlike all the other NASs I've talked about thus far that arrive with 2 camera licenses in Surveillance Station, that have motion recognition, it's got all of the features and services of Surveillance Station, privacy masks, watermarking there, SD card support for edge recording there, C2 surveillance connectivity there, and all of the other features and services and client apps of Surveillance Station, including maps and just a myriad of different advantages. The DVA system adds to that with AI recognition, facial recognition, license plate recognition, thing recognition, motion detection, intrusion alert zones, and just a whole widespread arrangement of AI-powered recognition that allows you to not just get an alert every 2 seconds that a tree moved, real informed notifications and alerts. The reason I don't really count it in all of this, because it is too specialized. It is designed predominantly and almost exclusively for surveillance, and buying it for any other purpose would be pointless. But as you can see, the price tag, I haven't got it on there, it's $2,500 for this device without the storage. It has more camera licenses, but it is just a different beast to everything we've talked about thus far. But this has been all of the current 4-bays from Synology and who they're for and which one you should go for. Let me know if you found this video helpful in the comments below. I'll maybe put an article together for this, but for now, thank you so much for watching. Use the free advice section link below, the free Discord and community support forum. And if you've enjoyed this video and want to support this channel, please use the links in the description. If you plan on buying from Amazon, B&H, Newegg, Best Buy, they're all linked in the description. If you use those links, it costs you nothing extra. But anything you buy, and I mean anything you buy, results in a kickback coming to here at NAS Compares. It's just me and Eddie, and that money immediately goes into us helping and do what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.